Hello, BL lovers. Tonight's story follows Seon-woo, a poor Omega cleaner humiliated in a mafia mansion, until the cold heir introduces him as his husband. Because sometimes one public lie becomes the start of real love. Learned to clean marble before I learned to trust people, which was a useful order of education in Seoul because marble never pretended it was kind. It showed every footprint, every smear of rain, every careless drop of wine, and if you worked patiently enough, it gave the surface back to you without asking who you were. People, in my experience, preferred to keep a little stain hidden under the polish. My name was Lee Seon-woo. I was 29 and Omega, and most mornings I woke in a one-room apartment above a closed billiards hall with the faint smell of fried oil rising through the floorboards and my grandmother's pill organizer lined up beside the kettle like a row of tiny verdicts. I worked for a discreet cleaning agency that specialized in houses where the furniture had insurance policies and the owners had enemies. The agency called us estate maintenance technicians on invoices because rich people disliked seeing the word cleaner beside the amount they were paying. I did not mind the real word. Cleaning was honest. A dirty window became a clear one if I did the work properly. A silver tray did not praise me, then ask for a favor, then remind me that I should be grateful. I had once wanted to study textile restoration full-time. Not because I imagined myself in white gloves whispering over royal robes, but because old fabric had a kind of stubborn dignity. Torn silk could not be bullied into being whole. It had to be understood thread by thread. My days were arranged around practical things. I left water heating before I woke my grandmother, made rice porridge soft enough for her to swallow when her hands shook, checked the blood pressure log, then packed my cleaning kit with microfiber cloths, neutral soap, cotton gloves, a sewing case for emergency repairs, and the cheap thermos my best friend Do Han Bayol had decorated with crooked stickers of oranges. I visited the market on Tuesdays because the vegetable seller gave me bruised produce for less money after 5 in the evening. On Thursdays, I took the bus to an adult education center and sat among office workers and retired women learning conservation basics. I was usually the only person there with solvent marks on my cuffs and rent due in 3 days. That was not tragedy. That was arithmetic. The problem with arithmetic was that it did not care if you were tired. My father's debt had outlived him with the persistence of mold behind wallpaper. He had borrowed from men who lent money with smiles and collected it with witnesses. After he died, their documents found me. Some were legal, some were not, and the difference became less important when men began waiting outside the clinic where my grandmother received treatment. They never touched her. They only stood there in clean shoes, reading their phones, letting me see how easy it was to find us. My younger cousin Hyun-jae, who was 17 and had the soft, furious eyes of someone determined not to cry, told me we should call the police. I told her we would. I also knew the last officer I had spoken to had asked whether my father had really signed the paper. He had looked relieved when I said I was not sure. Han Byol called me a professional survivor, which sounded more glamorous than it felt. He worked with me at the agency and spent his free time making paper flowers in his rooftop room, each petal cut from old-fashioned magazines. He said flowers that could not die were more practical, and then he hid his eviction notices beneath them as if beauty could shame bureaucracy into leaving. He had a laugh too bright for the life he was living, and a fiancée named Jiram who loved him loudly in public and measured his phone battery in private. Han Bayol insisted Jiram was only worried. I had learned that worry could be another word for ownership when spoken by the wrong person, but saying so before a friend was ready was like trying to remove a stain with a knife. The mansion on Pyeongchang-dong Hill entered my life on a Monday, with sleet tapping at the bus windows and my shoes still damp from the previous job. Our supervisor, Ms. O, handed me the address in the agency office and looked as if she was giving me a prescription with unpleasant side effects. "Chae residence," she said. 3 days, deep service preparation, private event on Thursday. Do exactly what you're assigned. Don't wander." "I never wander," I said, which was mostly true. I explored with purpose. Miss O lowered her voice. "This family doesn't complain. They replace vendors." "That sounds peaceful. It means they don't warn you before ruining you." She liked me enough to frown when I made jokes. I liked her enough to take the warning seriously. The Chae residence was not famous in the way department store families were famous, with interviews and ribbon cuttings. It existed in that quieter layer of Seoul where money learned to walk without making noise. Officially, Chae Holdings owned ports, logistics companies, construction firms, and a private foundation dedicated to cultural preservation. Unofficially, people said old men changed their voices when saying the family name. I had cleaned houses for gamblers, assemblymen, actors, and one plastic surgeon whose bathroom had more mirrors than a dance studio. The Chae mansion was the first house where the security guards checked the underside of our van. Inside, the building was beautiful in a way that made beauty feel like discipline. Pale stone floors, dark wood screens, narrow windows framing winter pines, no object placed without intention. The housekeeper, Mrs. No, walked us through the service areas with a tablet in one hand and a ring of keys in the other. She wore a gray dress and the expression of a woman who could find dust by listening. No phones beyond the staff corridor, no photographs, no conversation with guests unless required, no entering the West Wing. If a room is marked with red tape, report to me before touching anything. Han Biol beside me whispered, "If a ghost appears?" "Bow politely," I whispered back. "Rich ghosts probably expect manners." Mrs. No turned her head. We became two statues with cleaning supplies. For 2 days, I worked in rooms larger than our apartment building's entire floor. I polished stair rails until my shoulders complained, lifted rugs with 3 other staff members, repaired a loose tassel on a curtain because leaving it would have made me more uncomfortable than doing unpaid work, and learned the geography of a family that preferred doors to conversations. The public rooms were prepared for Thursday's gathering, a succession dinner according to one chef who spoke only when the ventilation fans covered his voice. Chae Hyun-jae, eldest grandson, was expected to receive formal control of the family's legitimate businesses and enough of the hidden ones to make old men nervous. His uncle opposed him. His grandmother would decide whether to bless the transfer. There was also an alliance proposal with the daughter of a shipping family, which made the kitchen staff exchange looks over crates of pears. I first saw Chae Hyun-jae in the reflection of a black lacquer cabinet. He entered the long gallery while I was cleaning fingerprints from the glass case around a celadon vase. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit without a wasted line, his hair swept back from a face that looked carved rather than arranged. Some people entered rooms seeking attention. He entered like he had already measured every exit and found attention inconvenient. 2 men followed him at a distance, not bodyguards exactly, because their suits were too good and their eyes too empty for ordinary employment. Mrs. No appeared from nowhere. "Director Chae," she said. He looked at the vase, then at the cloth in my hand. "That case needs the pH-neutral solution, the older sealant clouds with alcohol." I blinked once. Rich people sometimes pretended to know about objects because owning them made ignorance embarrassing. His tone was not performance. It was specific and irritated by preventable damage. "I'm using neutral solution," I said, lifting the unlabeled bottle. "The agency labels peel off, but my incompetence has limits." Mrs. No inhaled as if I had dropped a plate. Chae Hyun-jae's gaze settled on me. It was not warm. It was not amused. It was the attention of a man reading small print in a contract someone else had tried to hide. Your name? Lee Seon-woo. You're not on the regular team. No, temporary staff, marble, glass, emergency tassels. Emergency tassels, he repeated. They rarely announce themselves before failing. One of the men behind him looked at the floor. Hyun-jae did not smile, but for a second his face lost half a degree of winter. Then he turned to Mrs. No. Keep him on the East Gallery and dining hall. He notices details. That was how powerful people complimented you, by assigning more work. On Thursday, the house changed temperature. Florists arrived with branches of white plum blossoms forced open too early. Chefs moved like a military unit, and security doubled at the gate. We were given black uniforms and warned again not to speak. Han Byol was placed near the service pantry. I was assigned to the dining hall and gallery because apparently noticing details had consequences. By 7, cars began rolling up the drive, sleek and dark, their doors opening to release people wrapped in wool, perfume, and calculation. I carried trays, replaced napkins, wiped a spill before it could become evidence of human weakness, and kept my eyes where staff eyes belonged. Then I saw Ma Sang-hoon among the guests. He was not the most powerful man in the room, but debt had made him large in my life. He owned a chain of loan offices registered under cousins' names and a smile that never involved his cheeks. He had visited my grandmother's clinic twice. He had once told me my father's signature looked beautiful on paper. That evening he wore a midnight blue suit and stood beside Chae Hyun-jae's uncle, Chae Yu-sung, who had silver hair, scholar's hands, and the courteous posture of a man who had destroyed people through committees rather than fists. Sang-hoon noticed me while I was replacing a water glass. Recognition passed across his face slowly, like oil spreading. He waited until the room had settled into that expensive quiet before calling out, "Seon-woo, is that really you?" Every staff member learns how to become invisible. The trick is not lowering your head too fast. Shame has a sound when it moves quickly. I bowed. "Good evening, sir." He laughed, delighted. "You clean here now? How hard-working. Your father would be moved." The dining hall thinned around us without anyone stepping away. People continued to sit, breathe, lift glasses, but attention gathered like wire. My hands remained steady around the tray. I was proud of that. A person could lose many things and still keep his hands. Chae Yu-sung tilted his head. "You know our staff?" "Family connection," Sang-hoon said. His father left quite a story behind. Debts, documents, some missing collateral. Young people suffer when elders behave irresponsibly. "I am working, sir," I said. "If you need anything, the head server can assist you." "What I need is honesty." Sang-hoon picked up a spoon from the table and let it fall against the edge of his plate with a bright, ugly sound. "Did you come here to work or to listen? Houses like this have valuable conversations." The insult was clever because it dressed itself as concern. A poor cleaner in a mansion could become a thief by suggestion alone. My uniform seemed suddenly thinner than cloth. Mrs. No moved toward us, face controlled, but Chae Yu-sung raised one hand slightly. She stopped. That tiny gesture told me more about the house than any rumor. Sang-hoon leaned closer. "Or perhaps you hoped someone here would pay your family's debts if you looked pitiful enough." I thought of my grandmother's pill organizer. I thought of Yun-chae pretending not to notice when I watered down soup so there would be enough for breakfast. I thought of Han Byol in the pantry, probably hearing every word and hating himself for being unable to interrupt. I could have apologized. That was what the room expected from a man in my position. Instead, I set the tray down on the sideboard, aligned it with the edge because disorder offended me even during humiliation, and bowed again. "My father's debts are not a secret," I said. "Neither is my work. If either makes dinner difficult, I can leave through the service door. A few guests looked away. Courtesy is often cowardice wearing gloves. Before Sang-hoon could answer, another voice came from behind me. Why would my husband leave through the service door? The room did not gasp. Rooms like that did not gasp. They sharpened. Chae Hyun-jae stood close enough behind me that I could feel the air change before I turned. He had entered without sound, or perhaps everyone else had become too loud in my head. His hand rested lightly at the back of my chair, not touching me, but claiming the space with an ease that made several people sit straighter. I stared at him because I was intelligent, capable, and temporarily robbed of language. Sang-hoon's smile collapsed first. Chae Yui-sung's followed more slowly, as if he disliked losing anything in public. Mrs. No's face did not move, but I saw her fingers tighten around her tablet. Hyun-jae, his uncle said. That is an unusual joke. I don't joke during succession dinners. Hyun-jae looked at me then, and his eyes gave nothing away. Seon-woo dislikes dramatic entrances. I apologize for forcing one. If a person could die from confusion while remaining upright, I was at risk. Sang-hoon recovered enough to laugh once. Director Chae, surely you don't expect us to believe... I expect very little from you, Mr. Ma. Hyun-jae's voice remained low. That has saved me disappointment for years. The old woman at the head of the table, Chae Hyun-ran, finally lifted her eyes. She was Hyun-jae's grandmother, small and straight-backed, with white hair pinned into a knot and a jade ring heavy on her finger. Hyun-jae, he bowed to her, the first sign of deference I had seen from him. Grandmother, bring your husband here. My legs decided they belonged to me again, only because fear is sometimes practical. Hyun-jae stepped aside, giving me room rather than steering me. That small courtesy registered even through panic. I walked to the head of the table under the gaze of people who had probably spent more on flowers that week than I owed in rent. Chae Hyun-ran studied my uniform, my hands, the faint bleach mark on my cuff, and the face I was trying hard to keep. When did this happen? Hyun-jae answered before I could invent a medical emergency. Privately, the registration is being processed. That was not quite a lie, I realized. It was worse. It was a sentence designed to create a future quickly enough to catch up with itself. Without informing your family, she said. That was the point. Chae Yui-sung smiled again, softer now. Mother, this is clearly a tactic. Most marriages in this family are tactics, Hyun-jae said. Mine is simply less decorated. I should have been angry. I was angry. I was also aware that Sang-hoon had gone pale, and that everyone who had just watched me be cornered was now recalculating the cost of my embarrassment. Power did not make humiliation disappear. It changed who paid for it. The dinner continued because rich families could step over an emotional corpse without wrinkling the carpet. Hyun-jae did not make me sit at the table. Perhaps even he understood that would be a cruelty disguised as theater. He told Mrs. No to take me to the West Study and send legal counsel. I followed her out with my pulse hammering in my ears and my uniform collar too tight. In the study, surrounded by shelves of books arranged by a mind that enjoyed order but distrusted comfort, I finally spoke. Am I having a stroke? Mrs. No poured tea into a porcelain cup. No. That's disappointing. It would explain several things. She handed me the cup. Director Chae will explain. Does he often marry staff members without asking them? No. Good. I would hate to be part of a pattern. This time her mouth almost curved. Drink. Your hands are cold. Hyun-jae arrived 20 minutes later with a lawyer named Kang Soo-min, a woman in her 40s whose briefcase looked more expensive than my education. He had removed his dinner jacket. Without it, he seemed less formal and somehow more severe. He closed the door, looked at me, then at the chair opposite mine. "Sit," I said before he could speak. "If we're married, I should be allowed to tell you to sit at least once." Ms. Kang coughed into her fist. Hyun-jae sat. "Mr. Lee," he said, "I used your name without consent. That was unacceptable." That is a calm way to describe making me your imaginary spouse in front of criminals and relatives, though I admit those categories seem to overlap. They do. "Wonderful. I can undo it publicly," he said. "There will be consequences for you if I do. Ma Sang-hoon will treat tonight as proof that you tried to deceive this family. My uncle will use you as a witness against me or a tool against you. Your agency will dismiss you by morning. Your grandmother's clinic route is already known to Mr. Ma's men. I can contain those problems, but not if I pretend the statement was meaningless." I looked at him for a long moment. "You say, contain the way other people say clean. Containment prevents damage. Cleaning admits damage happened." His gaze sharpened. "And you prefer admitting it." "I prefer not being treated like a vase someone moved before asking the owner." Ms. Kang opened her briefcase. Director Chae anticipated that response. Did he? He asked me to prepare 3 options. First, a public correction with compensation and protective measures for 90 days. Second, a private settlement that places you under foundation employment for 1 year and separates your name from tonight's claim. Third, a marriage contract. The cup in my hand had cooled. Of course, the traditional 3. Hyun-jae said nothing. Ms. Kang placed documents on the low table, each clipped separately. The third option would formalize the statement made tonight. Legal marriage registration within 48 hours, public announcement within 1 week, duration of 18 months unless extended by mutual consent. Separate bedrooms, no physical obligations, personal privacy protections. Financial payment placed in an independent account for your use, not managed by Director Chae. Full legal review of your father's debt. Security for your grandmother and cousin. Employment protection or support if you choose to leave your agency. Exit clause after the succession vote, with continued medical and legal support, guaranteed for 3 years, regardless of personal relationship. I hated that part of me listened. I hated that he had not offered only one path. I hated that the third path sounded like a door in a burning hallway. What do you get? I asked. Hyun-jae folded his hands. Long fingers, no rings. My grandmother requires proof that I can form an alliance not arranged by my uncle. The bylaws governing the family trust include a spouse clause for succession authority. It was written decades ago to prevent heirs from being isolated and easily manipulated. My uncle planned to use it against me by forcing an engagement to the Yu shipping family. A registered spouse breaks that plan. So you need a legal shield with a pulse. I need someone my uncle did not choose. And you found me because a debt collector humiliated me between courses. I noticed you before tonight. The sentence landed strangely. I remembered the gallery, the Celadon case, emergency tassels. That is not as reassuring as you think. I know. That stopped me more effectively than a defense would have. He was not trying to charm me. He was laying out facts, including the ugly ones. I asked Ms. Kang, "Who do you work for?" My firm, technically. Director Chae retained me tonight. If you consider any contract, I advise you to choose independent counsel. I can recommend 3 attorneys who dislike him. Only 3? 3 who would answer my call after dinner. Hyun-jae looked at Ms. Kang. Send all 3 names. She nodded. The mansion felt too quiet around us, the dinner continuing somewhere beyond the walls like a play performed after the audience had lost interest. I read enough of the documents to understand I needed sleep, counsel, and perhaps a different life. The compensation figures made my mouth dry. The clauses about my grandmother were specific down to clinic transport and emergency contacts. The privacy section forbade surveillance inside my private rooms, phone monitoring, medical interference, and forced social appearances beyond the listed schedule. Someone had thought about cages and tried to describe where the bars could not go. "You prepared this before tonight," I said. Hyun-jae did not deny it. "Not with your name. That makes it only slightly less alarming." My grandmother's dinner created a deadline. I had candidates vetted. "Candidates," I repeated. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. "People with reasons to accept and enough independence to negotiate. I did not intend to choose under pressure. Yet here we are." Yes, I stood because sitting made me feel too much like I was waiting for permission to exist. "I'll take option 1 tonight. Public correction can wait until tomorrow. I want the names of those lawyers, copies of everything, and a car to take me home without anyone following me into my building." Hyun-jae rose as well. "Done. And Mr. Ma? He will not approach your family tonight." "That sounds temporary." "It is." I almost laughed. "You could lie a little for atmosphere. You would notice." That was the first honest compliment he gave me, and I disliked how precisely it fit. At home, my grandmother was asleep in the folding bed by the window, one hand curled near her cheek like a child. Hyun-jae sat on the floor with textbooks spread around her and looked up when I entered. "You're late." I accidentally attended a succession dinner. Is that a rich person thing? Apparently, I did not tell her everything. I told her enough to make her close her book slowly and say, "We need a lawyer." "Yes. Not a handsome, threatening one. The lawyer is a woman." I meant the man who caused the problem. "He's not handsome." Hyun-jae stared. I removed my shoes. "He's unfortunately symmetrical. That isn't the same." She made tea while I sat at our small table and opened the copied documents with hands that had begun to shake now that nobody important could see. At 19, Hyun-jae had delayed university after her mother's death and moved in with us because family, in our branch, was less a tree than a set of people holding one another upright in bad weather. She wanted to study environmental design. She pretended she did not care whether that happened this year. I pretended not to notice the application tabs open on her laptop. By morning, 2 things had changed. First, Ma Sang-hoon's men disappeared from the clinic entrance. Second, my agency suspended me pending client review. Ms. Oh called in a voice tight with helpless anger and told me not to come in until the Chae residents clarified my status. "I'm sorry," she said. "They're saying you created a disturbance." I was promoted from cleaner to disturbance in one evening. That's career growth. Seon-woo. I know. After the call, I met attorney Yoon Hye-ri, one of Ms. Kang's recommendations, in a cafe near Mapo, where the tables were too close together for secrets. She had short hair, round glasses, and the brisk manner of someone who had seen every version of desperation and refused to be impressed by it. She read the contract, asked me questions so direct they felt like medical tests, then leaned back. "It's unusually protective," she said. "That's comforting in the way a very clean knife is comforting." "Good. Keep that instinct." She tapped the page. "The payment structure is favorable. The legal support is strong. The medical clauses for your grandmother and cousin are enforceable if revised, but the social obligations are broad. The residence clause needs work. The termination terms protect you financially, but not reputationally. And there is no penalty if his family harasses you indirectly." Can it be fixed? Everything can be improved until someone refuses. The question is why he wants you specifically now. Because he said something reckless in public. Men like Chae Hyun-jae do not say reckless things in public. They say useful things quickly. That sentence stayed with me through the afternoon as I returned to the Chae residence, not as staff this time, but as a potential spouse, which was a promotion no sensible person would envy. Hyun-jae received us in the same West study. He had dark shadows beneath his eyes and a fresh cut near one knuckle. I noticed because my work had trained me to see damage. He noticed me noticing and placed that hand beneath the table. Attorney Yoon did not waste time. My client will not live in any room without his own lock and independent access. Agreed, Hyun-jae said. He will keep his phone, bank accounts, identification, and schedule. Agreed. No staff member reports on his private conversations. Agreed. If your family or associates threaten his grandmother or cousin, the contract terminates at his discretion with benefits intact. Ms. Kang glanced at Hyun-jae. He said, Agreed. I turned to him. You didn't even pretend to resist. Would resistance improve the terms? It would make me feel less like you expected to lose. I prefer losing quickly when the other side is right. Attorney Yoon's eyebrows rose slightly. I put that sentence away, unwilling to admire it yet. We negotiated for 4 hours. I insisted on keeping the adult education course. Hyun-jae's security chief objected to the location because the building had 4 public exits and poor cameras. I told him my life had contained public exits before he discovered them. Hyun-jae overruled him after asking for the class schedule, not because he liked it, but because I refused to sign if education became decoration. I insisted Han Byul not be fired for association with me. Hyun-jae made one call. By evening, my friend had not only kept his job, but been transferred away from a client who had been delaying payment to the agency for months. That wasn't in the contract, I said. No? Then why do it? Your friend looked ready to break a tray over Ma Sang-hoon's head last night. Loyal people should not be punished for restraint. I did not know what to do with that, so I criticized the tea. The registration happened 2 days later in a government office where a bored clerk stamped our documents without looking up long enough to appreciate the absurdity. I wore my best coat, navy wool with a repaired lining. Hyun-jae wore a black suit and no expression. Attorney Yoon stood beside me. Ms. Kang stood beside him. It looked less like a wedding than a merger between 2 people who had both brought witnesses in case the pen turned violent. When the clerk asked if we understood the legal meaning of marriage, I almost said no, but Attorney Yoon's elbow found my ribs gently. Hyun-jae answered, Yes. I said, Legally, yes. The clerk stamped again. That was how I became Chae Hyun-jae's husband. Not with music or flowers, but with fluorescent lights, 2 lawyers, and a vending machine humming beside the door. The public announcement came 3 days later. It described me as a private citizen involved in cultural preservation work, which was a generous way to say I knew how to remove candle wax from antique wood. It mentioned a quiet registration and asked for privacy. The internet did not ask for privacy. My name traveled through comment sections, gossip accounts, investment forums, and anonymous boards where people debated whether I was a gold digger, a hidden lover, a political move, or all 3 with better shoes. Someone found an old agency photo in which I was carrying a vacuum cleaner and circled my face in red. Han Byul sent it to me with the message, At least your posture is good. Moving into the Chae residence felt like entering a museum where the exhibits had opinions. I was given a suite in the East Wing with a bedroom, sitting room, bathroom, and a small work table by the window after I asked where I was supposed to mend things. The lock worked from inside. I tested it twice. Hyun-jae watched without comment from the hallway. Waito, are you offended? I asked. No. Most people dislike being treated as potential threats. Most people have not given you reason. The answer should not have steadied me. It did, a little, because he did not ask to be trusted in advance. Our first week as spouses was a study in mismatched habits. I woke early because poverty teaches you that morning is cheaper than afternoon. Hyun-jae seemed to sleep in brief negotiations rather than nights. I made rice in the small kitchenette attached to my sitting room because the mansion breakfast involved too many covered dishes and staff pretending not to hear my stomach. On the third day, Mrs. No informed me that Director Chae had ordered a rice cooker placed there. "I didn't ask for one," I said. "He said you would dislike asking. He says many irritatingly accurate things." She looked at the new appliance. "Use it before it becomes a symbol." That became my first rule of the mansion. Every object could become a symbol if left unattended. Hyun-jae and I argued about security on the fourth day. I wanted to take the bus to class. His security chief, Mr. Jang, wanted 3 men and a car. I asked whether he also planned to carry a banner reading "Suspicious Wealthy Household Member in Transit." Mr. Jang did not find me charming. Hyun-jae listened from behind his desk while I explained that arriving at adult education with a convoy would not help me remain a human being. "You can take the bus," Hyun-jae said finally. Mr. Jang looked betrayed. "Director." 2 guards in plain clothes. They do not enter the building. They do not speak to him unless necessary. I folded my arms. 1. 2, Hyun-jae said. 1 can follow a threat. 1 can stay with you. I hated that this was logical. "I choose them," I said. "You don't know them." "Exactly. I want to interview the people who may watch me buy discounted radishes." Mr. Yang muttered something under his breath. Hyun-jae said, "Arrange it." That evening I interviewed 4 guards in the service dining room. 1 called me sir too often. 1 stared at my neck as if biology were a resume. 1 laughed when I asked if he could pretend not to know me in public. The 4th, a woman named Im Hye-jin, said, "I can pretend anything if the pay is good, but I won't ignore danger to protect your pride." "Fair," I said. "You're hired." Hyun-jae approved without comment, though later I saw Mr. Jang rubbing his forehead in the hallway. Marriage, even fake marriage, rearranged other people's behavior before it touched feelings. The same agency that suspended me sent a polite letter asking if I would consider consulting for delicate textile care at the Chae Foundation. Ms. O called separately to say she had not written the letter and that the director was sweating through his shirt. I told her I would consult only if the agency paid the cleaning team for the overtime they had stolen during the holiday rush. 2 hours later, Ms. O sent a photo of revised payroll notices and a message full of crying emojis she would deny in court. "You used my name," Hyun-jae said that night when I told him. "I used my name. Yours was standing nearby with a large shadow. You negotiated well. I cleaned for people like you for 7 years. We learn where the corners are." He looked at me over the edge of a document. "People like me. Rich, difficult, surrounded by objects that cost more than kidneys. Legal kidneys or black market kidneys." I stared at him. His expression did not change, but I had the unsettling impression that Chae Hyun-jae had made a joke. A terrible one, but still. I covered my face with one hand. "Please don't develop a sense of humor. I have enough problems." The first public appearance was a foundation preview at a gallery in Hanam-dong. Attorney Yoon had approved the schedule. I had approved the suit only after refusing 3 outfits that made me look like someone's decorative regret. Hyun-jae waited in the foyer while I adjusted my cuffs, his gaze briefly lowering to the place where I had repaired 1 loose button myself. "The tailor could have fixed that," he said. "The tailor did not need the emotional satisfaction. It is uneven. It is secure." He stepped closer, then stopped at the distance we had agreed counted as polite. "May I?" I should have refused on principle. Instead, I lifted my wrist. He straightened the cuff, fingers careful not to touch my skin more than necessary. His hands were cool. There was a faint scar along the base of his thumb, old and pale. He noticed me looking. "Knife?" I asked. porcelain. That is either refined or embarrassing. My brother threw a vase when he was 12. You caught it? It was Ming. Of course, family affection measured in dynasty value. His mouth softened almost imperceptibly. Then the car arrived and we became a couple for cameras. At the gallery, Chae Hyun-jae greeted us with both hands extended and a smile polished enough to reflect knives. Nephew, Seon-woo, may I call you that? No, I said. Hyun-jae looked at me. I looked at a painting of a mountain and pretended innocence. Hyun-jae's smile held. Mr. Lee, then, welcome to the family. Thank you. I hear families are complicated. I'm studying. A woman nearby choked delicately on champagne. Hyun-jae did not rescue me from the conversation. That mattered. Men accustomed to possession often mistake another person's voice for a loose thread needing to be tucked in. He let me answer insult with courtesy, sharpened to my own preference. When Hyun-jae asked how I was adjusting to the residence, I said the floors were excellent and the people required more specialized cleaning. Hyun-jae turned his face toward a sculpture, but I saw the corner of his mouth betray him. The evening shifted when a reporter asked whether our marriage had been arranged to secure the succession vote. I could feel every advisor in the room preparing a response. Hyun-jae's hand hovered near my back without touching. I answered first. Most marriages are arranged around something. Family, money, loneliness, timing, bad judgment. Ours is arranged around privacy, so I hope you'll forgive me for keeping some of it. The reporter blinked, unsure whether I had said anything useful. That was the point. Hyun-jae guided us away after, his palm finally touching the back of my coat lightly enough that I could step out from under it. I did not. In the car, he said, "You are good under pressure." I'm good with stains. Pressure is just a stain with an audience. You don't have to answer reporters. I know. Then why? Because if everyone speaks for me, people will believe I have nothing to say. He looked out the window at the river lights. My mother used to say that. It was the first time he had mentioned her. The words appeared and vanished before I could ask for more. I did not chase them. Some doors shut because they were locked. Others shut because someone was leaning against them from the other side. Han Byul visited the mansion after 2 weeks, wearing his cleanest sweater and the expression of a man entering a tiger enclosure with snacks. Mrs. No served tea. Hyun-jae came too, pretending she was not impressed by the library while reading shelf labels with hungry eyes. My grandmother refused to visit because rich houses had too many stairs and too few honest smells, but she sent kimchi in a plastic container. Mrs. No received it with grave respect. I liked her for that. Han Byul pulled me into my sitting room and whispered, "Is he cruel?" "No." "Is he kind?" I looked toward the door, beyond which Hyun-jae was probably being informed by 17 people that my friend had arrived. He is accurate. Kindness hasn't decided whether to rent space. Han Byul sat on the edge of my chair. Ji-ram says I shouldn't come here often. He says people will think I'm using you. Ji-ram says many things that make me want to clean his mouth with bleach. Seon-woo. What did you say back? He picked at a paper cut on his finger. Nothing. That was his subplot, though neither of us would have used such a clean word for it. Han Byul could stand up to rude clients, broken elevators, and the agency director during payroll disputes, but at home he shrank around one man's moods. I recognized the shape of it because fear in domestic clothing still had the same bones. I told him he could visit whenever he wanted. He said I was busy being married to a crime prince. I said crime princes had guest hours. Later, I found Hyun-jae in the hallway outside the library, speaking quietly with Mr. Jang. He ended the conversation when he saw me. "Don't stop plotting on my account," I said. "I assume it's load-bearing." "Your friend's fiancé has 2 assault complaints withdrawn by former partners." The air seemed to tighten. You investigated Han Beol? I investigate anyone entering this residence. I stepped closer. He came here as my friend, not your variable. Hyun-jae's face closed. Information prevents harm. Information can also become a leash. He may be in danger. Then tell me as a person, not as a director managing household risk. For a moment I thought he would argue. He had that stillness men get when their authority is unused to meeting a wall. Then he nodded once. You're right. The apology was not ornate. It did not ask me to admire it. He took a paper from the folder in Mr. Jang's hand and offered it to me. I should have asked whether you wanted help before gathering this much. I cannot unknow it. You decide what happens next. That was one of the first moments I understood the difference between a man restraining himself because a contract required it and a man learning the shape of restraint because another person demanded it. I took the paper. My anger did not disappear. It changed direction. Han Beol denied the complaints mattered when I told him. He said Jiram had been young. He said people exaggerated. He said leaving was expensive. I did not say the word love. I did not say the word abuse. I asked if he wanted copies of the complaints. He said no, then texted me at 3 in the morning asking if I still had them. By breakfast, Hyun-jae had arranged a meeting with attorney Yoon for him. He did it through me this time, with one sentence. Ask him if he wants legal advice. If he says no, I will not raise it again. The mansion began to develop strange pockets of ordinary life. Yoon-jae came twice a week to study in the library and argue with Hyun-jae about urban redevelopment after discovering he knew too much about zoning. My grandmother's clinic transport changed to a quieter company, and when she demanded to know who had paid for the upgraded wheelchair cushion, I blamed the marriage bureaucracy. She told me bureaucracy had finally made itself useful. Mrs. No learned that I preferred barley tea after work, not because anyone ordered her to, but because she noticed which cups I finished. I started consulting at the Foundation's conservation room 3 afternoons a week, where I handled old textiles with gloves and tried not to feel like desire had returned wearing a work apron. Hyun-jae never appeared there without reason. That was important. He came once to approve a donor visit and found me bent over a torn ceremonial sash with tweezers in hand. He stood behind the observation line marked on the floor. You can come closer, I said. It's not a crime scene. Your concentration changes when people stand too close. I looked up. You noticed that? Yes. And decided not to stand close. Yes, it was such a small exchange that anyone else might have missed its weight. In my old life, men with power had treated my discomfort as a negotiation they had already won. Hyun-jae had seen a boundary I had not spoken and obeyed it without asking for praise. I returned to the sash before my face could reveal more than I wanted. The old silk lay under my hands, fragile but not weak. The succession pressure increased in ways that reached me through symptoms. More guards at the gate. Mrs. No checking windows already checked. Hyun-jae receiving calls in Japanese, English, and the clipped Korean of older relatives. Articles appeared suggesting I had manipulated him. Anonymous posts claimed my father's debts were tied to fraud against Chae affiliates. One morning, a package arrived for me containing my old agency uniform, washed and folded, with a note that read, "Remember your place." Mr. Jang wanted to lock down the residence. Attorney Yoon wanted to sue 3 media outlets. I wanted to burn the uniform in the courtyard. Hyun-jae found me in the laundry room holding the shirt. I had gone there because it was the only place in the mansion where being upset near fabric made sense. "I know who sent it," he said. "Of course you do." "My uncle's aide." "Of course he did." I can respond. By respond, do you mean a lawsuit or something that makes lawyers sweat? Both are possible. I set the shirt on the counter. No. No? I'll respond. He watched me carefully. How? By wearing my actual work clothes to the family lunch tomorrow. That will be interpreted as provocation. It is provocation, just affordable. The next day, instead of the suit selected by the stylist, I wore dark trousers, a clean white shirt, and the indigo work jacket I used in the conservation room. It had visible stitching along one pocket where I had repaired a tear with gold thread as practice. Hyun-jae saw me in the foyer and paused. "Too much?" I asked. "No." "Too little?" "For them, yes." "Excellent." At the family lunch, Chae Geum-ran examined the jacket and asked who had mended it. I said I had. She held out her hand, and after a second I understood she wanted to see the seam. Her fingers moved over the gold thread. "Kintsugi for cloth," she said. Less philosophical. I didn't have matching thread. For the first time the old woman laughed. It was brief, dry, and devastating to her son's mood. Chae Yui-sung spent the rest of lunch treating me as if I were a stain that had learned conversation. His daughter, Chae Rin, was different. She watched more than she spoke. A woman around Hyun-jae's age with tired eyes and a diamond bracelet she kept turning around her wrist. After lunch, she found me near the powder room. "My father sent the uniform," she said. I assumed. "He thinks shame is efficient." "Many people do. It usually requires the other person's cooperation." She looked at me then, really looked. "Hyun-jae will sacrifice anything to win. I've noticed he enjoys victory." "No," her voice lowered. "I mean anything, including himself, including you, if he decides losing you prevents a larger disaster." I did not know whether she warned me out of kindness, strategy, or exhaustion. Perhaps all three could occupy the same body. Before I could answer, Hyun-jae appeared at the end of the hallway. Chae Rin smiled for him, with a sadness so practiced it looked like etiquette. On the drive back, I asked about her. Hyun-jae was quiet long enough that the city changed districts outside the window. "Rin was raised to replace me if I failed," he said. "Then to marry where useful, when replacing me became unlikely." "Does she want that?" "No." "What does she want?" "To leave." "Can she?" He looked at his hands. "Not yet. There were many kinds of cages in that family. Mine at least had a contract I could mark with a pen." The emotional turn, if I had to name it later, did not happen during a dramatic rescue or an expensive apology. It happened in a storage room under the foundation, surrounded by crates of donated artifacts and the smell of paper, dust, and climate control. I had gone there to inspect a damaged folding screen before restoration. Hyun-jae was supposed to be in a board meeting upstairs. Instead, I found him standing before an unmarked crate, one hand resting on the lid. I should have left. Privacy matters most when it is inconvenient. But he spoke without turning. This was my mother's. Inside the crate lay a child's jacket, deep blue silk faded at the shoulders, with small embroidered cranes along the hem. The stitching was uneven in places, not professional. Beside it were 2 wooden spools and a pair of silver scissors. "She made clothes when she was angry," he said. "That sounds healthier than several family traditions I've seen. She made this for me after my father locked me in the West Wing for refusing a meeting." I was 9. I stood very still. He said heirs should learn isolation early. She said children should learn sleeves can be widened when they grow. His thumb moved once over the crate edge. "She died before finishing the second cuff." His voice did not break. Nothing so obvious. He simply stopped speaking, and the unfinished cuff in the crate became louder than any confession. "Why keep it here?" I asked softly. "My father ordered her rooms cleared after the funeral. Mrs. No hid what she could. I moved these to the foundation when I gained access." He looked at the jacket with an expression I had never seen on him, not grief displayed, but grief disciplined until only its outline remained. "My uncle found the inventory last week. He suggested donating it publicly as part of a family exhibit. A loyal son honoring his mother." "That's obscene." "Yes." "What will you do?" "Burn the inventory record. Move the objects. I glanced at him. That is illegal. So are several things my family does before breakfast. I should not have laughed, but I did quietly, and he looked at me as if the sound had touched a bruise. Then he closed the crate. I wanted you to restore it, he said. The jacket. I did not ask because it would make my grief your obligation. The fact that he understood that difference pierced me more cleanly than any request would have. I can look at it, I said. Looking isn't obligation. He nodded once. Thank you. I did not touch him. He did not touch me. The space between us felt altered anyway, not filled exactly, but acknowledged. After that day, I became more careful around my own thoughts. It was easier when he was only cold. It was easier when kindness could be filed under strategy. A man who preserved an unfinished sleeve for 20 years was harder to dismiss. A man who did not ask me to mend it because he feared turning grief into debt was harder still. The problem with feeling safer is that you begin to notice where you are still afraid. I pulled away for a week, not dramatically. I attended classes, visited my grandmother, worked at the foundation, answered Hyun-jae politely, and retreated to my suite before conversations could grow private. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He let it continue for 4 days before waiting in the East Wing corridor with 2 cups of tea. Did I do something? He asked. No. That answer is efficient and unhelpful. You're learning my methods. He handed me 1 cup. If the objects in the storage room made you uncomfortable, I can assign another restorer. Don't. Then what should I change? The question was so direct I almost answered with a lie out of self-defense. Instead, I looked at the steam rising from the tea. Nothing. That's the problem. He waited. When you were only the man who turned my life into a legal maneuver, I knew where to put you. Now you notice things, and you stop when I ask, and you don't use every advantage you have, and you show me unfinished sleeves. I don't know where to put that. His face remained composed, but his fingers tightened around his cup. You don't have to put it anywhere. Everything goes somewhere. Not everything needs a decision tonight. That was not what I expected. I expected authority dressed as reassurance, perhaps a deadline, perhaps a neat category. He offered me delay instead. For a man trained to secure outcomes, waiting was not emptiness. It was labor. The next external pressure came through Hyun-jae. She was accepted to a university program she had pretended not to want, then received an email threatening to reveal her connection to me and accusing our family of debt fraud if she enrolled. She brought it to me with a face so pale I forgot how to be clever. Hyun-jae was in a meeting with foundation donors when I entered without knocking and placed the printed email on the table. Every person in the room learned something from my expression and decided to leave quickly. He read it once. This is my uncle. I know. I will handle it. No, I said. We will. His gaze rose. Hyun-jae is not a stone on your board. She is my family. I want the email traced legally. I want Attorney Yoon involved. I want your grandmother informed before your uncle tells the story crooked. And I want Hyun-jae to decide whether she still wants to enroll before anyone builds a fortress around her life. Hyun-jae's first instinct moved across his face like a shadow. Contain, decide, protect. Then he breathed once and reached for his phone. Tell Attorney Yoon to come, he said to Mr. Jung, and ask Hyun-jae if she is willing to meet my grandmother tomorrow. Ask. Do not summon. That was another hinge in the story between us. He did not become gentle. He did not become easy. He corrected course while the ship was moving. Hyun-jae chose to meet Chae Gumran and arrived in her school blazer like a soldier wearing borrowed armor. The old woman listened to the threat, asked 3 questions about her program, then said, Study. Let old people embarrass themselves without your assistance. Hyun-jae looked at me. I shrugged because I had no translation. Chae Hyun-jae turned to Hyun-jae. Your uncle has become sloppy. He has become pressured, Hyun-jae said. Good. Pressure reveals construction. The family war that followed was fought through board votes, legal filings, donor calls, and one memorable breakfast during which Mrs. No removed all sharp knives from the table before Chae Yui-sung arrived. My role changed too. Yui-sung's people offered me a private settlement to leave before the succession vote. Enough money to cover debts, clinic costs, Yun-chae's tuition, and Han-byol's new apartment. The offer came through Chae Rin, who looked ashamed before she even opened the envelope. My father asked me to deliver it because he thinks you pity me, she said. Do you want me to? No. Good. Pity is heavy to carry. She sat across from me in a quiet cafe near the foundation, bracelet absent from her wrist for the first time. If you take it, he will still lose some ground. Hyun-jae can recover. You could leave. Is that advice? It is what I would do if I knew how to leave. There it was, her subplot, her cage, suddenly placed on the table beside mine. I thought of Han-byol asking for complaint copies at 3 in the morning. I thought of my own hands signing a contract because survival had narrowed the hallway. Freedom looked simple only to people who had never had to price it. What do you want, Rin? She looked out the window. A gallery in Busan, small, contemporary ceramics, no family name on the door. Then why are you still here? Because my mother lives in a house my father controls, and my younger brother's medical care runs through a company account. I slid the envelope back. Then let's not let your father keep winning with the same trick. I told Hyun-jae about the offer that evening. He read the papers in my sitting room while I stood by the window, watching rain stripe the glass. You should consider it, he said. I turned. Excuse me? He placed the papers down. It gives you most of what you need without further exposure, and gives your uncle what he wants. I can fight him another way. By sacrificing me before he can? His silence answered too slowly. Anger rose clean and hot. Chae Rin warned me you would do this. Rin understands the family. Rin is trapped by the same disease you keep calling strategy. His eyes hardened. This is not about strategy. It is about reducing harm. To whom? Because I am standing here telling you that being quietly removed from my own marriage for my benefit feels familiar in the worst possible way. You would be free. No, I would be purchased by a different man and congratulated for escaping. I stepped closer, my voice low because shouting would have given the room too much satisfaction. The central issue has never been whether I leave. It is whether I decide. He flinched. It was small, nearly invisible, but real. I won't stop you, he said. You just tried to persuade me with fear. Because I am afraid. The words remained between us, plain and almost awkward. He looked as surprised by them as I was. He continued more quietly. When people stay near me, they become useful to my enemies. My mother stayed. Mrs. No stayed. Rin stayed in the family because I could not protect everyone at once. I know how to win against my uncle. I do not know how to keep you from paying some part of the cost. There it was, not a speech, not softness replacing him, but a narrow opening in the armor where truth showed through. Then don't keep me, I said. Stand beside me while I decide what cost is mine. The confrontation did not end with an embrace. Real conversations often end with paperwork. We called attorney Yoon, Ms. Kang, and, at my insistence, Chae Rin. By midnight, the plan had changed. I would reject the settlement publicly through counsel, not as Hyun-jae's grateful spouse, but as a claimant filing harassment charges tied to Ma Sang-hoon's debt documents. Rin would provide internal messages proving her father's aide coordinated media leaks and threats. In return, Hyun-jae would establish a medical trust for Rin's brother, independent of family control, before the filing went live. Not as a favor hidden in shadows. As a documented transfer approved by the Foundation Board. "You are blackmailing my uncle with compliance law," Hyun-jae said when I explained one clause. "I'm cleaning," I said. "You should appreciate the method." He looked at me then, tired and intent. "I do." The succession vote arrived without drama visible to outsiders. Inside the mansion, everyone moved as if the floor might remember footsteps. Chae Gum-ran summoned me before breakfast. She sat in the sunroom with tea and the blue jacket I had begun restoring laid across a silk cloth. "My daughter-in-law made that," she said. "I know. She hated this house. I waited. She loved my grandson anyway. People think those cannot live in the same body. They can." The old woman touched the unfinished cuff. "Do you love him?" I nearly dropped my tea. "That is a private question." "Yes. Then enjoy not knowing." She laughed again, softer this time. "Good. He needs someone who does not answer every summons." I looked at the jacket. "He needs to stop summoning." "He is trying. Trying is not absolution. No, it is only a beginning." After the vote, Hyun-jae became official head of the trust and its associated companies. Yoo Il-sung lost enough power to become courteous in a new, colder way. Ma Sang-hoon's documents were challenged in court, and 2 loan offices under his cousin's names received visits from prosecutors. Han Bayol moved out while Ji-ram was at work, with Hae-jin and 2 agency cleaners helping carry boxes. He cried only after placing his paper flowers on the windowsill of his new room. Yoon-chae enrolled in university and sent me photos of campus benches as if proving they existed. Rin left for Busan 3 weeks later, not free of every tether, but holding the lease to a small gallery in her own name, and Hyun-jae dissolved our contract. He did it in Attorney Yoon's office on a clear afternoon that made the Han River look deceptively simple. The revised agreement placed my compensation, grandmother's medical fund, Yoon-chae's tuition support, legal protections, and housing options beyond marital status. If I divorced him that day, the benefits remained. If I stayed, they remained. If I left the country and opened a ridiculous textile shop in Iceland, Attorney Yoon said they still remained, though she advised me to research taxes. Hyun-jae signed first. His face revealed nothing. I had learned to read him better than nothing. "Why now?" I asked. "Because you were right." He set the pen down. "Asking you to stay means nothing while leaving costs you everything." Attorney Yoon suddenly became fascinated by her printer. I signed the dissolution of the old contract. My hand did not shake this time. Outside the office, Hyun-jae stood beside me near the elevator. For once, no guards hovered within hearing distance. We had insisted. It felt strange to be alone with him in public after months of performing privacy in a mansion full of staff. "What happens now?" he asked. I looked at him. "You tell me, Director Chae. You enjoy plans." "I have one." "Of course." "Dinner. Somewhere without family, reporters, lawyers, or succession bylaws, if you agree." "Are you asking your ex-contract husband on a date?" "Yes." "Says that's administratively messy. I can prepare documents." I laughed before I could stop myself. His eyes warmed in that restrained way I had come to recognize. Not a transformation, not a thaw staged for romance, but a private light permitted through a narrow window. "Dinner," I said. "One condition. Name it." "I pay for my own bus fare there." I assumed. "No, you did not." "No," he admitted. "But I am learning." The date was awkward, which made it better than a fantasy. We ate noodles at a place near my old apartment because I wanted to see whether he could sit on a plastic stool without looking like a kidnapped executive. He managed, though the auntie running the shop recognized him from the news and gave us extra kimchi with trembling hands. I told him his fame was bad for small businesses. He told me my preferred restaurant had uneven flooring. I told him romance was alive and limping. After dinner, we walked to the closed billiards hall below my apartment. The sign was still broken. The stairs smelled the same. I had not lived there for weeks, but the building greeted me like an old coat. Worn, familiar, not warm enough but mine. Chae Hyun-jae stopped outside instead of following me up. "You don't have to come in," I said. "I know." That was why I invited him. The apartment looked smaller than I remembered, perhaps because my life had expanded in inconvenient directions. Grandmother's folding bed had been moved to her new clinic residence. Eun-chae's textbooks were gone. Dust had gathered on the windowsill. Hyun-jae removed his shoes and stood in the narrow room without commenting on its size. I appreciated that more than praise. I took the orange sticker thermos from the shelf and handed it to him. "This is the most valuable object here." He examined it seriously. "Because?" Han Byul decorated it after I got promoted to lead cleaner. The promotion came with a raise small enough to be insulting and large enough to matter. We drank barley tea from this on the roof and pretended adulthood was going well. Hyun-jae held the thermos with both hands. "Then it should come back with you." "Back?" "If you choose to live at the residence again, or somewhere else." "I am not asking tonight." I looked at him in that cramped room where my old life had once pressed against me from every wall. "You are asking something." "Yes." "What?" He set the thermos down carefully. "Let me continue. Not as your protection plan, not as your emergency. As someone you may refuse." It was not elegant. It did not try to solve every wound with one sentence. It was exactly as much as he could say truthfully. And perhaps that was why I trusted it. I touched his sleeve, the first touch I initiated without needing it to prove anything. "I may refuse badly. I have a talent for comments." "I know. I may keep working. I expect you to. I may argue with your security team until they form a union. They already requested hazard pay." I smiled. He looked at my mouth, then back at my face with visible effort, waiting. Consent, I had learned, could be spoken in many ways. Sometimes it was a question held back until the answer had room. "You can kiss me," I said. He did not move quickly. He stepped close enough for me to change my mind, and when I did not, he touched my cheek with the backs of his fingers first, a question in contact rather than claim. The kiss was quiet. It tasted faintly of broth and winter air. Nothing about it erased the contract, the fear, the mistakes, the rooms where we had hurt each other by trying to prevent worse harm. It joined the record instead, another thread laid carefully beside the others, not hiding the tear, but helping the cloth hold. Spring came to Seoul in uneven pieces. Plum blossoms along the mansion wall opened before the wind had softened. I moved some of my things back to the East Suite and kept my old apartment for 3 months because leaving a life should not be done too neatly. Hyun-jae did not object, though he did send someone to fix the stairlight after I mentioned it was broken, and then had the sense to apologize before I could accuse him of renovating my independence. I accepted the apology and the safer stairs. Growth, I decided, could be mutual and annoying. The blue jacket took longer to restore than expected. Some threads had rotted beneath the embroidery, and the unfinished cuff required a choice: imitate his mother's hand or preserve the break. I asked Hyun-jae. He stood beside my work table, not too close. "Preserve it," he said after a while. "She did not finish it." "That is true too." So I stabilized the silk, secured the loose cranes, and mounted the jacket in a shadow frame that could be opened if he ever wanted to touch it. Chae Gyum-ran came to see it and said nothing for several minutes. Mrs. No cried in the pantry later, very quietly, and threatened me with extra side dishes if I told anyone. Han Byul opened a small paper flower stall near Mangwon Market. With a loan from a community fund attorney Yoon helped him find, not from us, because he wanted freedom without gratitude bending his neck. Hyun-jae complained about professors, which sounded like happiness in a practical coat. Rin sent a photo from Busan of a ceramic bowl displayed under clean lights. On the back of the postcard, she wrote, "Shame was efficient until it met stubborn people." Hyun-jae and I still disagreed. He disliked my habit of repairing socks past their natural lifespan. I disliked his ability to turn breakfast into a security briefing. He tried to schedule rest for me once, and I wrote "declined" across the printed calendar invitation in red pen. He kept it pinned inside his desk drawer. I found it months later while looking for a stamp and laughed so loudly, Mr. Jang checked the hallway. On the morning our original contract would have ended, I woke before dawn in the East Suite, not because fear had called me up, but because the light had changed. Hyun-jae was in the sitting room, reading reports with his tie undone and the orange sticker thermos beside his elbow. My thermos had migrated into his routine without ceremony. That was how real life moved in, I thought, not through grand declarations, but by leaving useful objects where another person could reach them. He looked up. "You were supposed to sleep. You were supposed to stop saying 'supposed' before 7. I made tea." That is a better sentence. I sat across from him and opened the thermos. The barley tea was slightly too strong, the way he made it when distracted. On the table between us lay no contract, no legal draft, no emergency clause waiting for signatures. Only his reports, my mending basket, a postcard from Busan, and the blue jacket's spare gold thread catching the early light. I took the thread and tied it around the thermos handle so Hanbyol's orange stickers would stop peeling at the edge. Hyun-jae watched me do it, his expression quiet and unguarded in a way the world rarely earned. When I finished, I pushed the thermos back toward him, and he accepted it like something entrusted, not owned.